everybody, and welcome to another episode of Tangent TV. My name is Joseph Lanzalata, and I am the Student Entrepreneurship Program Manager at Tangent, Trinity's Ideas Workspace, as you see up on the screen here. And this is now Imagination Week. So, Imagination Week, you'll see it on the top bar at the top. Where that comes from in Tangent, we have three primary things. We have imagination, we have collaboration, and then we have action. And accordingly, this season is going to be about each of those themes across a week, where we explore tools, resources, and even some videos that exist all online to put them into one space to help you become inspired, develop new ideas, and even in the chat start conversations potentially about what it is that you're working on or what are your thoughts on the things that we're going to go through. So the first thing that I have on the screen is just the Tangent website. If you haven't been to the Tangent website before, you can go in there. If you are a student of Trinity College Dublin, you can sign up to Tangent Online. It's an open Blackboard module with resources like the ones we're going to go through today for innovators and entrepreneurs. If you are not a student of Trinity College Dublin, you're also welcome to sign up to our mailing list. We put out a once monthly newsletter with loads of opportunities and ideas about what's going on. So just two things I wanted to point out before we got started today, but to dive right into it, today we're going to be looking and starting out this week by looking at some trends that exist out in the world, some trends that exist, and how those might be the inspiration for ideas that can come in the future. Now, there are a lot of lists that are out there, and there are a lot of people who have different opinions on different trends that are going on in the world, and there's no possibility that I am going to be able to cover all of them. So my aim today is to go through just a sample size of those trends, of those things, from an article that I thought was particularly interesting, and then I'm going to give you guys a resource, a actual canvas that you guys can use both today and throughout the rest of this week to look at the things that you think are particularly interesting, the trends you think are particularly interesting, and dissolve them down into a idea that can potentially be actionable. And maybe out of that, when we get to next week, Collaboration Week, we'll be able to introduce you to the right people to start getting those ideas off the ground. So, enough of me just talking aimlessly. I am going to dive us right into the article that I have here. It's from the Board of Innovation, as you can see there. I will share all of the links in the description once this video is uploaded. So if you're watching it afterwards and this video is uploaded, the links will be in the description. But for now, what I will do is I am going to put the link to this article into the chat of this conversation. If anybody wants to look at it separately or try and get ahead of me, by all means, go right ahead. Otherwise, I am going to go through this article and then we'll go on to some of the resources. So they're looking at what's on the horizon, kind of what are some of the trends that are up and coming. And so the first trend that they have that you all see up on the screen is attacks on robots and algorithms. So I am just going to give a quick read through what they've said, and then if you guys have any comments or questions, pop them into the chat. Otherwise, I'll move through. There's maybe 10 of these, and then we'll move on. So while the European Parliament mulls the legal issues around autonomous robots, aka electronic persons, Bill Gates has been vocal about the idea of slapping a tax on robots. Not because he foresees robots hiding their money in offshore accounts, but because the tax would raise money to retain the workers who are replaced by their mechanical counterparts. In Gates's master plan, the money could also be spent to inject much-needed cash into sectors such as senior care and education, where human skills are better suited. So this is definitely a big trend that could potentially happen. I don't know what governments will institute a tax on robots. However, this is a good example off the top of a potential trend wherein we will have to deal with the fact that robots are going to come in and are going to be taking on certain jobs and certain roles. We'll keep moving through though. So the next one that is here, I don't want to give it all away before I get there, is urban planning being crowdsourced. So urban planners and policymakers are looking at new ways to design cities based on crowdsourcing. Crowd urbanism uses online platforms to find new ideas by reaching out to the masses so that cities are built from the figurative ground up. We've come a long way from feudalism, baby. Very funny. So you can see why I chose this article. I enjoy it myself. But the idea of urban planning and the fact that we are going to crowdsource this, I think is an indication of a lot of other trends that are out there, which is crowdsourcing everything. So the idea of everything being diversified thinking. So this can even be projected a bit bigger, but I think the idea of urban planning from the ground up and considering the needs and wants of everybody involved is really interesting. As with all crowdsourced algorithms, though, it's how do you weight the value of each opinion that is put in. So an interesting thought around that, and this is where each of these can potentially inspire ideas. And this is where when I'm looking for new ideas and I'm looking at things, I start with these big trends, and then you can look at, okay, well, where's a bite-sized, manageable piece of something like this, say urban planning is crowdsourced, that I can potentially take on. So something in my own life or some problem that I see and face. But this is where we start. So I'll keep moving us forward. I promise I won't take as long in between each one. We will get through them. 3D printing food, so not counting on its predecessor, the bread machine. Among the first 3D printed food was candy, made by a US company for a consumer electronics show in Las Vegas in 2014. Since then, you could say the palette for digital food has become more refined, with sweet and savory recipes emerging for 3D chocolate, marzipan, dips, and even meat. Even Michelin star chefs are embracing the craze. For Italian grandmothers, though, signals the culinary fall of Rome. So not everybody has a positive opinion on every trend that is going to be out there. In this in particular, people who enjoy cooking and the art of cooking is not something that they're necessarily going to get into, but there is a lot of movement in the food space and in the development of processes in food, as there have always been since the beginning of time, but now potential for automation of food creation processes is a really big industry and something that's potentially really interesting on the horizon. So keep a lookout. On that note, it kind of is very similar. Is test tube meat and insect food become mainstream? So the idea, it will be interesting to see if vegetarians get their vegan leather panties in a twist over lab-grown meat, or whether they will embrace the trend and dive into a guilt-free burger, grown in a lab from cow cells. Slaughter-free steaks are now on offer. The insect food movement is also gaining speed. Swiss startup Acento is serving up burgers with meatworm larvae to popular acclaim, and while most won't be the first to grab a bag of crickets as a healthy alternative to chips, for those who do, the packaging label read "Caution may contain bugs." Now this is particularly interesting, as I know there was a student group that was working on bringing crickets as a protein source into the diets of more Western people. This was in Trinity College a few years back, so it is something that is up and coming, the idea of insects being a protein source that's actually potentially better than most meats. So the adoption of it is purely based around the psychology. So are people willing to take this on is the next step. And this is where, as I said, this is a big picture thing. Our job as innovators is to boil that down into something that is potentially manageable. So maybe in your community, there is a way that you'd be able to bring insects into the diet. Just an idea. But this is where we start. So next, the government makes plant-based diet compulsory. I think the idea of compulsory diet is interesting. It's something that could potentially happen, but the trend towards it, I can see how that is a trend in the fact that people are adopting it naturally. They go on and they talk specifically about how in India, it's a nation made up largely of vegetarians, so there are a lot of people already adopting this idea. It's, again, just expanding that idea elsewhere. So this is a thing that we see a lot in new innovation. It's not something entirely new. It may just be new in a certain place. So the idea of a vegetarian diet is something that may be new in Western culture or maybe new to certain areas, but in many parts of the world, it is something that has already existed for a while. And this is where, looking at these big picture trends from across the world, we can see what might just not have happened in your backyard yet, and that is an opportunity that you might be able to jump onto. I'm just seeing Colin in the chat there, you put there was a show on Channel 4, Kevin MacLeod's Rough Guide to the Future, and they had a segment on lab-grown food and insect food. Very interesting. Should be on the 40D player. Very interesting. So there have been people talking about lab-grown food and insect food for a while. The challenge, I think, is just getting people like yourself and myself to then adopt that as something. And this is where the space for innovation comes in. Because with each of these mega trends that we may be able to project that in the future, maybe all of our food eventually is going to be made by machines, but in between where we are now and where we are there are going to be these incremental steps. And this is how we can start to think about the new innovations that are going to push us forward. So I'll keep us going. blockchain for medical data becomes the norm. Now, maybe you've heard of blockchain medical data on the blockchain before, but that being normalized is something that we're still a bit off of. So with mass migration expected to continue for the foreseeable future and no fixed address being the status quo for many globetrotters, medical data that can be accessed via mobile phone could become a major benefit to those hopping borders. Likewise, for healthcare systems needing a way to understand the health history of those on the move, healthcare files in your pocket could be an extension fitting your life into a backpack. So this is the idea, not just people who are migrating entirely, but just people who are going on vacations. I know I like to go and travel as much as I can. And when I do, if for God forbid I did get sick, it is great to be able to have my medical data on my phone and not have to worry about the connection of healthcare systems. All the power is then in my hands to be able to develop that on. So an interesting potential trend. I'm going to go through these a bit quicker, guys, just because I don't need to spend as much time diving into every individual one. I think the value here is going to be when we get to the exercise afterwards, but if you guys have anything to say on these individual trends, do just let me know. Next is an IQ test to determine the right to vote. Potentially, I would be interested to see which country would be actually willing to implement that. I'm not sure of the morals of that, and I know that they do go into the fact that that would be a huge problem. Tech companies are sued for causing dependency, so this is around the addictiveness of technology and the idea that there are actual people employed in these tech companies to get you to use it more often. So it's driving addiction to social media and these sorts of things. Would they be sued for that? Or is there a step in between and now and them being sued for that you might be able to either help the tech company become more moral while still driving profits, or help individuals like myself use social media less in order to be okay, which kind of leads us into the rise of mindful technology. It's the idea of these mental wellness apps or meditation apps like Headspace or Calm. They're up and coming because people feel the need to disconnect and get themselves out of that space. So an interesting new development. The first right to disconnect law. Now this I found particularly interesting. I'm just going to read through it. So because many of us are not skilled at creating boundaries around work-life balance, governments are stepping in to protect employees from workaholic schedules imposed by an employer. If these bills pass, it would be illegal to require staff to reply to after-work emails or text, say goodbye to putting your boss on airplane mode while you shower, and say hello to good old-fashioned dinner without being pinged. So it's an interesting idea around kind of stepping away from that social media or constantly on life, where it is mandated that you are able to be off the clock, let's say. And then next, judges are trained in algorithmic fairness. So this is around the idea of using artificial intelligence to determine law, which is something that takes things out of the hands of the human. And there are a lot of conversations that are a lot deeper around this, but this is kind of where it could end up. It's a projection towards the future as where it potentially could end up. I think judges being trained on that is an interesting concept, but I think if artificial intelligence is a thing, which is up and coming, which I believe it is, everybody in theory should know a bit about what algorithmic fairness is and how we can be a part of it. And then two more. So private-public integration becomes the norm in mobility. So this is the Uber, Lyft, or in Ireland, having Free Now. It was My Taxi, it was Halo, it had many names before, but the idea of ride sharing and these sorts of things becoming the new normal for public transport is an interesting trend. Oceans will be farmed, the ideas of farming in oceans. Down below this is seaweed crops and shellfish such as oysters, mussels growing in a polyculture vertical garden. Sounds fishy in a good way. It's the idea of gardens that can exist in a non-conventional way. So innovation in agriculture is on the same trend potentially as the innovation in food production. And then, I said two more, there's one more. The last, Antarctica and Arctic will be open for business. So the idea of there are 53 countries that collectively govern Antarctica. Having that become something where there are new business opportunities is an interesting thing. Right now, it's more of a tourism thing than that, but an interesting projection. So, guys, this was just kind of the intro to what are some of these potential megatrends. As I said, this is in no way an all-inclusive list. These are projections of things that might happen in the future, And looking at those things that might happen in the future is based on a trend towards that. Now we can look at kind of how do we get in between now and the projection of then and see where there's inspiration for an idea. And sometimes that comes at the crossroads of two of these different megatrends. So what I have for you guys is what is called a canvas. If you've used the business model canvas before, or the lean canvas business model, you're familiar with these types of exercises. The idea is that it's a one piece of paper that you're able to kind of use to fill out and work towards an end goal. So in this sense, the canvas we are going to be working with is called the consumer trend canvas. And as promised, guys, I'm going to put that consumer trend canvas into the chat here so you guys can have a look. The consumer trend canvas, the idea, understand and apply any consumer trend today. So this is the next step in line of looking at these big trends, is looking at what are the trends, what are the big things that are happening, what are these projections of things that might happen way in the future, and then how do we dissolve that down into actionable information for today. And so this is a exercise that you can look at. So the definition, right? Consumer trend canvas, an easy to follow framework that will help you not only unpack and understand any consumer trend, but also help you apply it to launch successful consumer facing innovations of your own. So when we talk about innovation, we often talk about being consumer centric and solving a real problem for a real person. This allows us to contextualize that within the needs of that consumer and within the broader innovation ecosystem and within the broader trend ecosystem that exists outside of it. So I will continue down. This is what the canvas actually looks like. And for all of you who are going to look to download it right now, I have just here a canvas. This is a template that is downloadable. You just go up here and hit the download button. I will put that in the chat and also put that into the description afterwards. So there you have I believe that is the actual link. Yep. So that is the link to download. If you would like to download afterwards, by all means. For now, I'm back to here, and we're just going to go through exactly how to work your way through this canvas. As you'll see, there's two sides to it. There's analyze, and then there's apply. On the analyze side, we have basic needs, drivers of change, emerging consumer expectations, and inspiration, which leads us to apply innovation potential, who it's for, and come out the other side with your innovations. So I'm going to walk you guys through just the basics of how to do that based on this website. If you want to come back to it, the link I said is to the website here, so you are able to read a bit slower if you'd like to, or work your way through it as you go with the instructions alongside you. But for now, how do you use the canvas? The idea is that you're going to print it out as big as possible. You can take a trend either from this website, they have some trends, or elsewhere. It could be one of the ones that we looked at. For the sake of this, I might lean into the idea of the mental wellness apps being a thing that's emerging. Also, because it's in my head, there was a mental wellness app that ended up winning the Launchbox program just last year, Keep Appy. If you want to check them out, please do. But I'll kind of look at that space just because it's one that I'm a bit more familiar with. So start with the left-hand side, analyze, then you turn to the right-hand side, apply, and finally you capture your new innovation idea. So how do we do that, right? We're going to go down to analyze first. The left-hand side of the consumer trend canvas will help you unpack and understand the trend. The first part of that is basic needs. So what deep consumer needs and desires does this trend address? Right? So there's a trend towards there being more of these headspace mental wellness apps out there. What is the basic human need that is addressing? I'll just read the little brief. So consumer trends and consumer behaviors more broadly are ultimately driven by three rarely, if ever, changing basic human needs and desires. Identifying these underlying needs is central to understanding any consumer trend. Where to start? How about these? So social status, self-improvement, entertainment, excitement, connection, security, identity, relevance, social interaction. Any of these could be one of the basic human needs that you'd be working from. In the case of this, it's mental wellness and mental stability and mental comfortability. There are a few ways you can phrase it. Even social interaction is something, but a positive social interaction, and that social media may be taking us away from this. What this first part is trying to do is help you devolve down what is a big trend of these things are happening into what is the base in the heart of humans thing that this aims to solve. It's the pain, it's the potential gain that they have from using whatever the trend is. So that's step number one. Then we move into the drivers of change. So the drivers of change section is looking at why this trend is emerging now. So it asks the question, why now? Why is this happening today? Why is this something that is happening? To analyze change, think shifts and triggers. So shifts are the long-term macro changes, and they have a list of their 10 macro trends for the next 5 years. Now, I will say that link is a bit outdated. I'll show you it here. These are the 10 macro trends, but it was put up in 2012. I do think a lot of them are still relevant. So an uncertain future, the emerging middle class, the disaffected youth, the rich-poor divide, the climate challenge, an aging world, the urban transition, people on the move, a more connected world, and China goes global. So a lot of those are still relevant today, but that's just to give you guys a taste of what some of these megatrends might be, as well as the ones that we looked at in the beginning. I'll jump back over to here. Those would be shifts. So, right, a changing middle class, right? Those sorts of things. Then the triggers are the more immediate changes that drive the emergence of the consumer trend. So, for example, the base need of a human is to try and stay mentally well. So have mental wellness, have mental health, good mental health, right? Then the shifts over time is a trend towards people not necessarily having as positive mental health, being overstimulated. There are a lot of things that are changing over the history of people. Then you look at the trigger, the more immediate change could be the introduction of cell phones, more specifically social media, which is driving up the anxiety of young people today. And that is kind of the building the environment that you're now understanding a bit more about the target group that you're aiming to solve a problem for. Then, once you have some of the drivers of change, and it wouldn't just be one, you'd take some time and lay out a few of them, you go into emerging consumer expectations. So, what new consumers need, want, and expectations are created by the changes identified above. Where and how does this trend satisfy them? So the interesting thing in this specific one is the problem necessitates the solution to fit within it in the mental wellness, because if the idea is that the trigger is people spending too much time on social media and because of that they are mentally unwell, it's interesting because they're spending so much time on their phone, they may demand that a solution involves their phone because the idea of changing from that takes too long, right? So that's where you have for example, the meats. So you have people 3D printing burgers, right? Because people still want to eat burgers, even if it isn't exactly the burger that they've grown up with, the hamburger that they're used to eating. They still want it to look that way. So it's finding these potential demands that you can't change, which will enable you to see where you can make an incremental change. So in the sense of Keep Happy, the mental wellness app, it's allowing you to still exist in your phone, but have your phone be a more healthy thing for you. And in that way, you're compromising to enable the user to still be comfortable with their way of life without completely upending the way they think about this. So this is really important stage to look at the consumer expectations and not assuming that people are going to just change at the drop of a dime. Just because you have brought a load of crickets into the world does not mean that everybody is ready to make that a primary part of their diet. So interesting thing to look at. You're looking at the expectation gap between what consumers want and what they currently have. So they may want social media to be good for them, but what they have now, it's not. So how do you work within that? Then you go on to continue analyzing the last bit, which is inspiration. How are other businesses applying this trend? So this is where it's seeing what other businesses, entrepreneurs, nonprofits, governments even, are already doing with the trend is a great way to better understand it and gain inspiration. Indeed, few innovations are totally new. Most successful innovation comes from combining seemingly unrelated elements or taking something and deploying it in a new context. So as I said before, it's the idea of there are a lot of ideas that exist around the world. They may just not exist in the place that you're in. So on the mega trend of using insects as protein, right? That exists somewhere in the world. It just doesn't necessarily exist where you are now. And you're just looking at the consumer expectations to see how you can potentially fit that into the market that you're working in now. So You can look at an existing business innovation, understand them, and then adapt them to your business. You could just take on what it is. If you already have a business, that works. Or if you're looking for new innovations, you may look, okay, there's Headspace and other things out there like Calm that are meditation apps. However, there may not be something out there that does the full spectrum of helping you better yourself in the mental wellness space that also conforms to the expectations of consumers and still fulfills the base need of mental wellness. This is how you kind of go through the different stages and can understand the macro trend and how your solution may be contextualized fitting within it. So with inspiration, you've now completed the one side of it, and it's time to apply. So this is where the right-hand side of the consumer trend canvas is all about identifying what opportunities this trend can present for your business. So for your business or for a potential business that you're looking to create. The first part of it is the innovation potential. So how and where could you apply this trend to your business, right? We've long said when thinking about customer trend, it helps to consider how and where it could impact your business using these 4 areas. So there are 4 areas here that you might look at if it's impacting a business you exist or how it's going to impact your potential future business that you're looking at developing. Vision. How will the deeper shifts underlying this trend shape your company's long-term vision? So if your company or your idea has a long-term vision, you've started this hypothesis on what you're working on, how does this trend align with or diverge from that future vision? Step 2, the business model. Can you apply this trend to launch a whole new business venture and brand? So this is where if you're an innovator, how are you taking this contextual information and applying it to develop something wholly new? The next is product service experience. What new products and services could you create in light of this trend? How will you adapt your current products and services to this trend? So this can be done in the way if you're on the journey already of developing a startup idea, of developing a new idea, you can look at it and see, oh, there are all of these trends that we've yet to consider. Do a map of this, fill out the canvas, and go, okay, how does that apply to the business I'm developing, and should I develop in that direction differently because of this new information I have? It's a means of processing information and applying it to your idea. And then finally is campaign. How you incorporate this trend to your campaigns and show consumers you speak their language, that you get it, quote, get it, right? This is why you start with the basic human need, because the closer you can get to understanding what that core desire of your consumer is, the better you're going to be able to communicate directly with them, and in the context of everything that's going around, be able to show them, here is the solution for you, and here's why I know it is that's something that you want. This is why in Tangent, in a lot of places, we emphasize getting out there and talking to your consumer. So when you actually talk to the potential person who you're solving a problem for, you gain bounds of information that you would never know unless you actually went and spoke to them. So this is looking at the innovation potential. Where is there space for developing something new? And then the last bit is who. So which new customer groups would this trend apply to? What would you have to change? So this could mean if there is a new development, say you're at the cusp of social media launching and there's a new group that is now using technology, which is young people for connecting, that would be a timing difference where when mental wellness may have previously been a challenge of a different group, it's now extremely relevant to this new group. Or you look at the new group that's very obvious. These Headspace and mental wellness apps have primarily been downloaded by younger people. Is there an unaddressed element or segment of the world that you could target this at? For the example of food around the world, or of bringing crickets, right? Bringing crickets, of using cricket powder, right, as a high protein source. It's something that people have used in other countries, but there's a segment of the market, most of the Western world, has not taken that on. And you can look at the expectations of consumers and why that hasn't happened, but this is where you're trying to open doors to what the potential is for this same solution or same idea or same trend to impact people beyond that which they already have. And that's why this is kind of the final thing, because you're thinking, okay, I understand it now. I understand what the problem is. I've taken guesses at what the innovation potential is, but now you're looking at who's the next group that's going to be the knock-on effect of this trend, and how do I solve that problem for them before they even have it, if I can, or are they having it right now, and what are their expectations in a solution that I can bring to them? And that's where You then come up with your innovation and you write down your new business ideas here. And this is an early stage ideation exercise that you can start doing now. You can start doing it as soon as you start to look at megatrends. And the reason that I've started with this on this week of Imagination Week is because now you will have this canvas as we go through other megatrends, other tools, other tips, other things that are out there. And if there is one that catches your eye, I would recommend trying to go through this canvas and break down and distill your ideas, using it to be able to come out of the other end of this with an idea that coming next week, when we go into Collaboration Week, we might be able to help you find other people around you who you can interact with to develop this idea, or people who share the same interests as you, which would be something that you can then build your team. And off of the back of that, we'll go into week number 3, Action Week. And Action Week will be when we actually make all of these things happen and dive into the ways to get things off the ground. So with that, guys, if you have any questions, pop them in the chat. If you guys would like to reach out to me, my email is on the Tangent website, or you can reach me at Joseph Lanzalata on LinkedIn. I am very open to chatting to all of you, but please do follow us on all of the social media channels just there. They're right there, at TCD Tangent, as well as subscribing down below. There are 2 more sessions scheduled for this week. I will put a third one up for Friday, and also we have a very special series kicking off on Thursday, so keep an eye out for that. But for now, guys, as I said, my name's Joseph Lanzalata, and I look forward to seeing you all in the next episode. Bye for now.